On May 6 of 1895, a shining star was born. His name? Rodolfo Alfonso Raffaello Pier Filiberto Guglielmi de Valentina de Antonguela, though most knew him as Rudolph Valentino. As a young man in Italy, Valentino struggled to find employment and moved to New York seeking more opportunity. He lived on the street for some time and found work bussing tables and tending to gardens. In 1914, he was hired to perform the tango with Joan Sawyer for $50 a week, eventually securing work as a taxi dancer at Maxim's Restaurant Cabaret. Around the same time, he befriended Chilean heiress Blanca de Sales, who was unhappily married to businessman John de Sales. During their divorce trial, Valentino took the stand to support Blanca's claims of infidelity. A vengeful John then used his political connections to have Valentino arrested on unspecified charges, but he was released after just a few days. Following the highly publicized case, he was once again unable to find employment. Blanca ended up fatally shooting her ex-husband during a custody battle over their son. Fearing he might be called in as a witness, Valentino skipped town and joined a traveling musical which led him to the West Coast. By 1917, he acquired bit parts in a few theatrical productions where he met actor Norman Carey. Carey convinced him to take his talents to cinema at the height of the silent film era. The two became roommates at the Alexandra Hotel in LA, where he continued dancing and teaching dance classes. Valentino eventually moved to Sunset Boulevard and picked up small parts playing heavies, or villains, but quickly grew tired of these roles and moved back to New York. After reading The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, he learned that Metro Pictures had acquired the rights to the film adaptation. Seeking a role, he visited their New York office and was surprised to find that writer June Mathis had been searching for him all along. She immediately cast him in the role of Julio de Noye. The film's 1921 release was a huge hit and became the sixth highest-grossing silent film ever made. But Metro was unwilling to acknowledge they had a star in their hands. Instead, they forced him into a bit part in a B-movie called Uncharted Seas, where he met his second wife, Natasha Rambova. Unfortunately, many found Natasha to be quite controlling, and their relationship went on to sever many of Valentino's personal and professional connections over the years. Seeking better pay and more respect, the budding star quit Metro and joined on with famous players Lasky Studio, or what is now known as Paramount Pictures. Lasky recognized Valentino's star power and cast him as the lead in The Sheik. The film was a major success and not only launched him into the limelight, but solidified his status as a sex symbol, one they called the infamous Latin lover. From there, the young star had a tumultuous career, starring in a series of both highly grossing and mediocre films. He grew unhappy with his pay and lack of artistic control and decided to go on a one-man strike against famous players. A drawn-out battle ensued, which put him $80,000 in the hole, while his extended contract kept him from working for any other studio. Defeated, he filmed 2 more movies with Lasky, including Son of the Sheik. Upon being released from contract, he signed on to do 4 films with Ritz-Carlton Pictures. Eventually, he was approached by both Charlie Chaplin and Douglas Fairbanks and asked to join United Artists. Valentino obliged, even though the studio would not allow his wife to be on set. To appease her, they gave her the money she needed to make her own film, though the damage was already done. The productions had put a strain on their marriage, and the two divorced in 1925. On August 15th of 1926, Valentino collapsed in his apartment at the Hotel Ambassador in Manhattan. What doctors assumed to be appendicitis was actually a ruptured ulcer. Though his prognosis was initially positive, after surgery he developed a severe bacterial infection, and his health began to decline. Doctors soon realized that he wasn't going to make it, but as was common at the time, they chose to withhold this information from Valentino. In the early morning hours of August 23rd, after briefly chatting with doctors about his future, he slipped into a coma and died just a few hours later. He was only 31 years old. On the day of his funeral, 100,000 people lined 11 blocks of Manhattan, and a full-on riot ensued when they tried to force their way into the funeral home. At least 2 women attempted suicide outside of the hospital where he'd passed. One woman in London consumed poison and died holding a photo of the actor. Famed actress Paula Negri, one of Valentino's lovers at the time of his death, caused further commotion when she fainted over his coffin. She then woke up claiming that he'd proposed to her before his death. Pronouncing herself his widow, she fainted again in front of a massive floral display which spelled out her name. After the funeral, she traveled with his coffin to California, feigning several more times at the various stops where mourners paid their respects, until his final resting place at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Valentino's cause of death was so rare that it was named Valentino syndrome after the actor. But some say there's more to the story, and attribute his untimely demise to something much more sinister. A cursed item in the actor's possession. In a San Francisco shop in 1920, Valentino spotted a ring. A simple silver ring that featured a large tiger's eye. Upon purchase, the jeweler warned him that all of its previous owners had been met with misfortune. Undeterred, Valentino wore the ring throughout the filming of The Young Raja, which turned out to be his greatest box office flop. He put the ring away for some time, only to don it again for the premiere of Son of the Sheik just a few weeks before his collapse. Of all of Valentino's belongings, Paula Negri chose to keep the ring, and almost immediately fell gravely ill, having to put her career on hold for a year. She recovered and married Georgian Prince Serge Midavani. Subsequently, she suffered a miscarriage, the loss of her fortune during the Great Depression, and her husband left her. Paula eventually gave the ring to a young crooner named Russ Colombo. From one Valentino to another, she told him, as he bared a striking resemblance to the late actor. Shortly after, he visited friend and photographer Lansing Brown, who owned many antique guns. As they sat in the library, Lansing reached for a dueling pistol when the gun suddenly went off. A fragment ricocheted off the table and hit Colombo above the left eye, killing him at age 26. From there, the ring made its way to Colombo's best friend, entertainer Joe Casino. Wary of its legacy, Joe locked it in a case and never wore it. Some years later, after being convinced by a friend that the curse was simply ridiculous, he put it on. A week later, his car was hit by a truck and he perished at the scene. The ring was then passed on to Joe's brother Del, who didn't believe in curses, and wore it for many years without incident. He even loaned it to a Valentino impersonator who suffered no ill effects. Del was confident in his theory about the ring until the night his house was robbed. The thief, James Willis, was shot and killed by police, the ring found in his pocket. Now a bit spooked, Del kept it under lock and key until 1938, when it was requested for a Valentino biopic. 21-year-old figure skater Jack Dunn was set to play the part, and wore the ring along with the late actor's clothes to a screen test. Just 10 days later, Dunn passed from tularemia, a rare blood disorder he'd contracted from handling a dead rabbit on a hunting trip. Finally a believer, Del Casino vowed that no one would ever wear the ring again and locked it in a bank vault in Los Angeles. The bank has since suffered 2 robberies where many thieves met their end. At his trial, gang leader Alfred Hahn admitted, "If I'd known what was in the vault, I would have picked another vault." It is said that the bank also suffered a cashier's strike and a fire. After Del's death in the 60s, the whereabouts of the cursed item remain unknown. Some say it's still locked in the vault, while others believe it continues to roam the world unrestrained, causing the demise of everyone in its path. If you enjoyed this strange but true tale, be sure to subscribe and check out previous episodes. We put out a new video every other Friday. If you enjoy blooper reels and behind-the-scenes footage, consider joining my Patreon. These are just a few of the patrons who make these videos possible. You all are the cat's pajamas. I hope that you have enjoyed this spooky journey through old Hollywood. This has been so much fun, and I think we might do it again at some other time. As always, thank you so much for watching, be well, and 23 skidoo! Stay strange, guys.